No matter who you are or where you go, heading outside is always worth it. Welcome to Humans Outside, where we're using the Humans Outside 365 Challenge to build a life around spending time in nature while learning from fascinating outdoor-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz. I've let curiosity be my guide as a journalist for 18 years. But life, including my husband's war injuries, had burnt us out. So we moved sight unseen to Alaska to see if a change of scenery and new focus on outdoors was just the shift we needed. Since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter what, to explore how nature can change my life. Ready to hear from experts and outdoor lovers who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same? Let's go! For most of us, spending time in nature daily is a side portion of our lives, done around work and other commitments. It's not how we spend every second or even most of our days. And of course, that stuff shifts with life seasons. Which is why you might spend all your time focusing on adventure in your 20s, but then move on to something more stable when you get a little older or have kids. For today's guest, Heather Balogh Rochfort, travel and adventure let her establish an expertise in getting outside, adventuring, and backpacking, and she used it to author the book, Backpacking 101. She has since authored several more books, including 2 that profile women hikers, women who hike, and moms who hike, talking about their stories and the incredible things they've done. She's also now a mom herself, who has recently founded Wildkind, which seeks to help families get and stay outdoors. All of that brings me to what she's joining us today to discuss, getting outside as a family. As part of our focus this year on spending more time not just in nature, but in the nature directly around us, Heather's going to help us with the challenge of making time for nature as a parent. We're not going to let these kids bring us down or keep us from having adventures. In fact, we're going to have adventures in nature around us, not just in spite of the kids, but maybe even because of them. Nature, I am happy to report, is for the whole family. Heather, welcome to Humans Outside.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me.
So we start our episodes imagining ourselves in our guest's favorite outdoor space, like we're hanging out, having a cup of coffee, which is my preference, somewhere that you love and that we can just hang out and talk. So where are we with you today?
Oh, that's such a tough one. But so I'm a Colorado gal, but I will say my favorite outdoor space is Thousand Island Lake in the Eastern Sierra in California. And it's sentimental to me because it was where we took our daughter on her first 5-night backpacking trip when she was just a little baby. And I have such good memories of it that anytime I want to go to my happy place, I go back to that lake.
Oh, I love it. This is a lake that you can only backpack into, or is it available by road?
Only backpacking. It's not easy. It's a bit of a slog, but if you're an adult without a kid, it's probably easier.
Everything's easier as an adult without a kid,
Right?
but I digress. How did you become someone who likes to go outside? Tell us your outdoor story.
Oh, goodness. So, my story is different than a lot of people. I am born and raised in Colorado in a suburb outside of Denver. So, I'm one of the like 6 lifelong Colorado residents left in the state. Um, but my parents had actually moved to Colorado from Ohio in the 70s. And so they came out seeking the outdoor stuff themselves. Like, I think my mom worked as a lifty to pay her way through college. So, they kind of had that foundation built. But classic, parents and kids, they tried to get us outside as often as we could, but we were kids and we argued and we complained and we whined. And my mom is actually a botanist. She has her master's in plant pathology. So she used to torment us by turning our hikes into these like nature walks where she would like identify the flowers and tell us how the indigenous people used to use them and all these things, which as an adult is really cool, but as a 10-year-old was really, really boring. um, so that was kind of the foundation, but simultaneously I grew up as a competitive dancer. I was actually a ballerina, and that was more of my interest. And as I got into my preteen and teenage years, I kind of left the outdoor stuff behind just for a number of reasons. And I just honestly wasn't that interested in it. I was more focused on dance. And that kind of stayed with me through my teenage years. Eventually went to college at CU Boulder. And as anybody who's ever been to Boulder can attest to, it's a very, very outdoor town. And I quickly befriended so many classmates and whatnot from out of state who had come to college in Boulder solely for the outdoors. And they were
Sure.
like, "What do you mean you don't want to go backpacking or you don't want to learn how to climb?" And that was when I started to realize that, like, hey, growing up here, I kind of took a lot of this for granted. All my new friends wanted to spend Friday night at the climbing gym. So, you're 18 and you have nothing else to do. So let's go do that. And so over college, I kind of started learning more and more about all of it. And then at the same time, I kind of phased out of my dancing career. I danced for college, I danced pro for a little bit afterwards. But once I hit 22, I was kind of like, what am I going to do with this? I'm not going to dance for the rest of my life. And so that transition right there, when I quit dance and fully started to dive into the outdoors right around age 20, 22, I kind of view that now as the beginning of the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Here in Alaska, of course, same thing. People move here to be in Alaska, or you're from Alaska and you wish you weren't here. And I meet a lot of adults who have lived here their whole lives and are only trying their first pair of snowshoes with me, right? Like we're now
Yeah.
together going on a hike and they've never even considered snowshoeing before because it was just not part of their daily lives as people who grew up here.
Hmm.
Um, and they're only now getting into being outside. Um, and I just like, I kind of wonder, how do you avoid having that happen to your kids?
Yeah, I have some good friends that I grew up with in Denver that have never been skiing. Like, I literally met them when I was like 3. They were my neighbors. They've been here their entire life and they don't know how to ski. They've never been skiing. They don't really like to camp. And I mean, that's their prerogative, of course, but they have kids now and the same mindsets being passed on to them. And I kind of want to just take them and be like, come on, let's just try this one time. One time, you're going to like it. I promise.
Right. Right. How do you so you also, after you became started spending time outside through your
Mhm.
um college experience, then moved on to quite the adventure lifestyle, did you not?
I did. So after college, I kind of became a vagabond a little bit. This was back in the early 2000s. And it was long before things like van life and stuff were so common and so popular. But I was very aware, acutely aware of the fact that I wasn't ready to settle down. And I had earned my degree in journalism, but at the time, freelancing wasn't as common or as known. And so I really was just kind of aimless and I didn't know what I was doing. And my parents were great about encouraging me, this is the time in your life when you're not tied down. And so I kind of took that concept and ran with it. I quit my job, kind of sold everything I owned, which at that point wasn't much more than a car, but still. And then first I did a biking trip across the country. So I biked from Colorado to Pensacola, Florida, and then from Pensacola up into Kentucky, and then over to the eastern coast, and then down the coast to Miami. And that took me about 4 or 5 months where I lived in a tent the whole time doing, it was a true dirtbag situation where I was like living in tents hidden behind Walmart in the woods and in some towns in like middle America, Kansas, these tiny little communities would let me put the tent in the middle of the town park, like basically anywhere free was what I was doing. And then after the bike trip, when I got down to Miami, I bought a one-way ticket down to South America. And I told myself I was just going to stay down there until I ran out of money, honestly, which turned out to be around 13 months. And I just backpacked around South America and Central America and hiked and camped and kind of learned a lot about who I was and what I wanted in life and what I didn't want in life. But eventually I ran out of money, as you do, came back to the States, realized I still wasn't ready to grow up. And I moved up to Steamboat Springs here in Colorado and decided to do the ski bum thing. So I became a ski instructor and taught little kids how to ski for a period of time. And then after a little more time, I was getting closer and closer to 30 at this point, and I was starting to feel like I should figure out my life a bit more. So I took a part-time job at the middle school as a Spanish teacher, actually. And I did not have a license for this, but small mountain towns often have a hard time finding qualified teachers. And my
Mm.
minor was in Spanish. I spent all that time in South America. I lived in Spain as well. And they were like, let's get you an emergency license to teach this year. And so that was kind of another pivotal point for me, because that year as a teacher was when I was like, okay, I'm ready to
Mm.
move on to the next chapter. And after that year as a teacher is when I moved back to Denver. And that's kind of when I started where I am now, I guess, the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, going from I wander around South America as my life to I am in Denver. Um, like a mom creating that, home life, just a more traditional lifestyle,
Mhm.
with still valuing time spent outside. Is that a tough transition? I mean, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, I won't lie and say it was super easy. It was hard. And I mean, there was a little bit of a gap in between. So I went back to Denver when I was 30. I didn't meet my husband, gosh, I think it was like a year or two later. And then we ended up not getting pregnant until I was around 35. So there was, a 5 year in between mode. But to your point, like, I met my husband on a media trip for the outdoor industry. We literally met backpacking in the Havasu Falls. So that kind of stuff was very core to who we were.
Mm,
And when we even started having the kid conversation, we both knew we wanted to have a kiddo, but we met later in life, we were having kids later in life, and we were honestly nervous. Like, what is this going to do to our fun, our adventure, the outdoor
right.
stuff? Like, is it going to change it? Is it going to be great? And we were nervous and we were scared, honestly, but we just decided now or never. I was getting older, in terms of maternity. I was already considered a quote geriatric pregnancy, which, side note, is the worst thing ever to tell a pregnant woman.
Yeah, it's a terrible term. I'm gonna lump that right in with elder millennial. What is that?
Oh, also right
Rude.
up there on the don't say list.
Rude. That's just rude.
But yeah, so we decided to make a leap. And the first year she was born was hard for me. I'm a freelance writer now. And so that meant I was lucky in the sense that I didn't have to go back to work after a certain amount of time. My husband went back, but I had a flexible schedule. So I was home with our daughter.
Right.
And, I loved her more than anything and was so grateful, and just this beautiful child that I couldn't stop looking at. But simultaneously, I was also longingly remembering my former life.
Right.
And anytime I did something like that, I would be thrown into this immediate guilt spiral for not appreciating my child more. And so that first 6, 7 months, honestly, I was constantly battling that vicious cycle of wanting what I had, but loving what I also had now, and trying to figure out who I was, like my new identity.
Yeah.
But I would say the turning point for me, anyway, was right around 7 months. And my husband has this wonderful corporate America job that gives all parents 4 months of paid maternity or paternity.
Hmm.
And he was allowed to use it at any point during our daughter's first year of life. So we had saved 3 months of his paternity leave. And we went on this 3 month road trip through the American West, just camping and living in a tent the whole time. And we left when our daughter was 7 months old, and we didn't come back, until she was 10 months. And that's when we learned how to take her backpacking, learned how to take her on a multi-night backpacking trip, took her on airplanes, day hikes, all these different things. And that was when I started to see the light, so to speak,
Yeah.
and realize, hey, you know what? I can do this. Like, it's different than it looked before, but it's still possible.
Yeah, it's an important moment where you realize that the things you valued or the recreation that you wish you had. So like we weren't I wasn't really an outdoorsy or camping kind of person. I just never had until after my kids were born. And then
Mm,
it was like, "Oh wow, this is going to be like this is something I want to do, but it's very daunting. I don't know how to camp by myself, much less with a
yeah.
1-year-old." And it's that really important moment where you realize like, okay, this isn't impossible.
Yeah.
This is something that maybe it's a little harder than it was when I did it before, if that was what you did. And it's different, that's for sure. And I've realized that now that we camp without my kids, you're like, wow, this is like way easier.
Right.
Even now that they're 12 and 9, it's a sizably different experience when they're not there.
Yeah.
Uh, that less whining from them. Same amount of whining
I
from
believe
me.
that. I
So
believe that.
but, yeah, it's a big moment where you realize, like, that you don't have to stop being who you wish you were or who you were
Mhm.
just because you have kids, and you don't have to stay home. You don't have to be a slave to bath time.
Yep.
You don't.
Oh, and what you just said right there, honestly, that component was huge because the first couple months, like, I didn't know what I was doing,
Right,
as most
right,
new parents don't, and I was going down the rabbit hole of internet research, which is a horrific place to be as a new mom, and was looking at all these sleep schedules and the do's and don'ts, and you're going to screw your kid up if you don't let her sleep in the crib 17 times a day, and all these different things that
mm,
internet strangers were telling me. And I was getting sucked into it for a little bit. And that compounded with the fact that my childbirth experience hadn't quite gone to plan. I ended up with an emergency C-section. I was put under with general anesthesia, so I actually missed our daughter's entire birth, which, with the postpartum hormones, was definitely
right.
something that it stuck with me for a while. And so I'm in this rabbit hole of weird information that does not match up with the lifestyle I want to have, and it was overwhelming and daunting, and it almost seemed like there was no way out. But once I kind of decided to just throw it away, like literally threw the books away, stopped looking at stuff on the internet, I was like, I'm not going to screw up my kid. I am a responsible functioning adult in society. I like myself. I think I do pretty okay. Therefore, I think I can help this little human I helped create mold into a wonderful person by doing the stuff that I deem to be what's best for her. And once I kind of
Right.
had that realization, it was a lot easier.
I like that we can now be 2 internet strangers to other people, telling them that the other internet stranger
Oh my
information is
gosh.
wrong.
Well, and it's a little different now, I mean, our daughter's only 4, so she's still in the early days, but I even feel like in her short life, the outdoor possibilities that you find on the internet, they're all over the place now compared to what they were 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot in the past couple years.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, do you find that getting outside with your daughter or family is different than like, even in that moment where you're like, "Internet strangers, no." Um, and then, of course, we're humans, so we immediately have our different expectations.
Right.
So, did your experience match up with the expectations you had for how it would be once you decided to do it?
Yeah, I think you touched on this earlier, but I don't think it's necessarily different than what I expected, but it's harder. And not in the same way. Like, it's harder in a different way. How's that for a weird string of words together? But like, our adventures now don't always involve questionable life choices or intensely painful cardio burns as we're trying to scale this massive mountain, or, something like that. Like, my husband and I do have our adults only days and adventures, and we save those for those kind of adventures. But they're harder now in the sense that I'm acutely aware of the fact that I'm always taking care of someone other than myself.
Mm, mhm.
Pre-kid, like, I could take care of myself, my husband could take care of himself. We look out for each other, but like, we're grown adults. But now we have
Right.
this little human who's entirely reliant on us for safety, but also, for entertainment, engagement. And that makes it a little harder because it's not just about us now. It's about us three.
Yeah.
And learning how to incorporate all of that into our adventures so that all three of us have an equally good time takes some
Hmm.
effort, because we don't want to drag her on these things because mom and dad like them and she's miserable. We want to learn how she can equally enjoy them.
Right.
And
Right, it's like the difference between adventures in exertion, which is the kind of adventure
mm,
I like, right? That
yep.
we work hard and then we see something awesome. Or we work hard and we experience something great. And instead it's an adventure in exploration
Mm,
and I don't know, what's the word for like being a sponge, like wonderment. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it is. It's fun to see, especially because she's at the age now where I think anyway that for it's a tough age because she's not able to do all the things on her own, even though she wants to. but she's also getting to the age where like throwing her in the kit carrier and carrying her is tough. And so it's kind of a physically demanding age because I'm still trying to carry this, 40-pound wiggling mass half the time. Or like if I throw her on the ski trail, I'm towing like 80 pounds. That's physically hard. But when she gets out and starts walking around or doing her thing, there is this just utter, it's like she sees the world with new eyes. Like this
Mm-hmm.
fresh blanket of snow to me, like, yeah, it's beautiful and I love it and sparkly. But to her, it's this like magical state that she's never seen before, that she's never experienced before. We're teaching her how to ski, and the giggles that erupt from her when she goes downhill is like the best reminder of why I love skiing. Like you just hear that pure joy come out, and you're like, that's it. That is why we do it. And that part's pretty cool.
Yeah. One of the benefits of learning to do outdoor stuff at the same time as my kids are, now,
Hmm.
obviously, I'm an adult, so I learn it in a different way than they do.
Sure.
But so many of the activities that we do as a family are new to all of us. So we're all learning how to cross country ski right
Mm,
now. We're all exploring. Just started doing some stargazing. I have never done that in my whole life, really. And my son, who is 9, and I see these things in a different way, but we're both seeing
yeah.
them for newly, right?
Yeah.
Fresh eyes. And so he is enjoying, for example, stargazing with this, like, he's making up choose your own adventure style stories for every constellation.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it's so fun to watch him do that. Drive you a little crazy after a while, but pretty fun.
That's kids though.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I'm doing the stargazing for the first time too. So we're both learning the how of that and learning about the constellations, and then we're putting our own different spin on it. Now,
That's
I
cool.
would prefer to be, speed skiing, like cross country skiing during this. Yeah,
Adrenaline.
because I'm like, I like the movement, right? And he just wants to sit there and watch the stars. So we all have our different flair, but it has been fun. Hey humans, did you know you can officially join the Humans Outside 365 challenge and score some really cool and exclusive challenge swag, including a finisher medal and a decal on humansoutside.com/challenge? You'll also get an outdoor challenge guide written by me for you, an exclusive challenge tracker, and insider info all year long. You don't want to be left out of this. There is never a wrong time to join the Humans Outside 365 challenge. So get going. Join it today. Go to humansoutside.com/challenge to learn more now. Now, back to the show. One of the things you just mentioned reminded me of something you said in your story, which is that your mom, who was a botanist, sort of like inflicted you with information about all of the plants,
Yep.
um, which is obviously something she enjoyed about
Mhm.
being outside. So I'm wondering if you have had to or have found yourself countering that drive when you approach going outside with your own kid. Like, do you feel like maybe I'm inflicting her with backpacking, and how do
Yeah.
you avoid that feeling?
100%. And that's something, especially as she's starting to get older, that we're more aware of. Like, are we doing this for us? Are we doing this for her? Like, is she having fun? And some of it comes into play. Like, for example, the one activity I don't like is rock climbing. I'm just
Mm,
not into it. I've tried to be a climber my whole life. Like, I love mountaineering, just do not enjoy climbing. It's not my thing. But we took her to the climbing wall for the first time, or I think she actually went at her preschool. And she loves it. She thinks it's amazing. Like she so clearly lights up when she's on there. She requested a Spider-Man birthday party at the rock wall this year.
fun.
Like it's her jam right now. And
Yeah.
like my husband can't climb because he busted all of his shoulders when he was in his 20s, so his arms just don't move like a normal human anymore. But like that's an example of sometimes I'll take her. I would much rather be doing something else. Like I just
Right.
don't get my thrills out of it, but I'm trying to encourage her to find her own things. And I'm really working to be aware that those might not be the same as my own. And so
Yeah.
there's that fine
So
line
hard.
of like, or, and sometimes too, like hiking, I think at this age is a big one. Which I get. Like, I don't necessarily enjoy day hikes for day hikes either. Like, I like backpacking and I like trail running, but like a short hour-long day hike to just get to a certain point on the trail and turn around doesn't really ring my bell. And I see that coming out in her now. And like we do it because it's something she can do and it's teaching her all these skills and it's good for her physically. But I'm also like, if she doesn't enjoy it, she doesn't enjoy it. Let's go find one of the 17 options she does enjoy. And to your earlier point, that's been kind of great because we're also learning new things. Like, we're not big on bikes, but she taught herself to ride a bike at 3.5 and is already in the pump track. So we're like, all right, maybe we should get big on bikes so we can all go biking together as a family. And that's kind of cool.
So I want to get really practical,
Ooh.
because you've done a lot of work giving other people advice on backpacking and hiking and telling other people
Hmm.
stories, and now you're learning this for yourself, and you're helping families get outside and make that a part of their everyday lives. So let's start by talking about what challenges you see for getting outside with kids, and then how you have found. Or how the people you have encountered who overcome this well do that.
Hmm.
Like, what's the secret? So
Yeah, right. If only it was that easy. In terms of challenges, I think there's two main ones that folks are continually running into. And the first is honestly the cost of gear. It's a
Hmm,
price thing. And we all know gear is expensive. It's expensive for adults too. But the difference with adults is you buy, a $600 Arc'teryx shell. You've got that for a long, long time. With kids, they're growing like little weeds and they're blowing through this stuff every single year, but it doesn't mean they still don't need high quality stuff to undergo the outdoor adventures I'm asking them to do. And so that's expensive. We're buying our daughter a $200 snowsuit every year because we need to buy this one particular brand that is amazing, but it's also pricey. If you want to go on some of these ski touring adventures, you need some type of ski trailer, and those things start at like $1,000. That is a lot of money. And I think we haven't quite figured out how to overcome that one, honestly. I think the outdoor industry is getting better and realizing that families want to take their kids outside. And now that they've come to that realization, I'm hopeful that they're going to start focusing more research and development on that area to hopefully take price down, have more options, do all those things. But honestly, right now, that's the first thing I hear from families. Like, they don't want to spend $300 on a kid carrier if they don't even know their kid's going to like
right. It's
it.
like it's like when your baby is born and you're like, okay, I got to have a swing and a
Yeah.
basket thingamabob, and then there's always some
Hmm.
new little thing with a word that called some title that someone completely made up right then. Um,
So true.
and yeah, and you're like, but I mean, what if the baby hates this stupid thing?
Hmm.
And thank God they now do have companies that rent this stuff out. And then of course, buying used or consignment is always an option, although you have to do your research and try and actually go to the store, all these like
Yeah.
barriers, right? That are
Yeah, and
hard.
it's hard. I mean, that's what we recommend to a lot of our families is that, find used gear, Facebook Marketplace, things like that. We actually started a gear swap on Facebook. It's called the Wild Kind Gear Swap that's dedicated to used outdoor family gear because there's just nothing else out there like that. And you're looking for stuff and you can find snowsuits and whatnot used elsewhere, but when you're looking for core stuff like used kid carriers or used trailers, it's really hard to find. And at least here in Colorado, I know if a used trailer goes up for sale, you'll get, oh my gosh, people descend on you because they're so in demand.
Yeah.
And I mean, at least now that the demand is there again, I'm hoping that it means the everyone will catch up and make it a little easier, but as of now, it's hard. It makes it really, really hard. And like you said, there's rental options too, but a lot of those aren't dedicated to kids gear. They're dedicated to adults gear still.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, I mean, and of course the supply chain issues. This is very like
yeah.
2021 problem,
Right.
2022, early 22 problem, but the supply chain issues that we've been seeing recently, not to
Hmm.
date ourselves too much here, is really making this problem worse. So if someone's
Yeah.
listening to this when this comes out, you may find that this is a real issue and that you have an even harder time finding you're going to go hunting for used gear like we're recommending, and it's going to
Mhm.
be feel impossible to find, and that's because demand is so high and
Yeah.
supply of even new stuff is so low.
It's a weird time in regards to the outdoor industry, and I'm not gonna take this conversation off the rails here, I promise. But again, I work in the outdoor industry, I've been around it for a long time, and it's definitely interesting to see its state right now because we've never, as long as I've been in it anyway, there's never been this level of interest in getting outside. And it
Mm,
is really fascinating to watch and observe how that has just changed the entire dynamic. And I'm
yeah.
curious to see, purely observational, how this pans out next summer, summer of 22, summer of 23. Like, I think at some point there will be a lot of used gear on the market because a lot of people aren't going to, they're going to realize
Yeah.
it's not their thing. But long term, I'm really excited to see so many people jumping in. I just hope that it grows in a sustainable and
Yeah.
responsible way, I guess.
So, but what you're talking about is not unrelated to this idea of families getting outside, because
Mhm.
if one of the barriers, as you said, and challenges is gear,
Mhm.
then having an having increased interest and having a lot of people who are getting outside, not only it does create a gear shortage as we've been discussing, but it
Mhm.
also creates um more people, like the hive mind, people thinking through this and what are workarounds and what are ways that we
Mhm.
can do this more easily. And
Mhm.
can I, what kind of layering of your clothes that you already own or something maybe less expensive works in lieu of the more expensive thing that you probably didn't want to afford or didn't want to spend your money on
Mhm.
anyway.
Yeah.
Like how can we do this? And so I think
Yep.
that's really exciting, because what it means is we have a community of people in the world who are interested in this and who are there to help each other tackle these sorts of things.
Well, and that honestly, that kind of ties into the second thing you asked about challenges, and I said gear, but the second one is that I do still think there's a lack of knowledge, and
Mhm. Mhm.
especially for kids, especially for younger kids in particular, I would say under the age of like 6 or 7. And I think it's because, our society, culture, whatever, for so long told us that taking your kids outside on these, extreme quote adventures, these type 2 fun adventures was not safe. It was not something you should do. Oh, you shouldn't take your baby outside in the winter, or why would you go skiing with your kid like that? What that's so much work. For so long it was something that you weren't supposed to do, that now that that is changing, there's not a lot out there. Like, we took our daughter on her first backcountry ski hut trip at like 3 months. We found a hut that was like fully heated and had electricity, so we felt pretty good about it. But I was unsure about the actual ski touring with a baby situation. So I did what any new mom would do, went to the internet, started researching. And that's when I realized there was nothing out there. Like, there was no resource, there was no blog post with tips and tricks, there was nothing. And you mentioned earlier that I co founded an organization called Wild Kind. That experience was one of the catalysts to starting Wild Kind, because I wanted to be part of the solution, because I knew if I was experiencing this lack of anything, a lack of assistance, support, information, there was definitely other families out there who were feeling the exact same way.
Right, right. And a lot of that is, as we're working to find information and working to overcome those challenges, a lot of it is also mindset. Where for that first
Mhm.
7 months of your daughter's life, you felt like you were a slave to the random internet stranger
Mhm.
advice. And once you changed your mindset about getting outside with your daughter, and that this could be a part of your lifestyle, if just in
Yep.
not the way that you had originally had being outside a part of your lifestyle, it's like
Mhm.
a, um, outdoor lifestyle light,
It is.
Yeah, um, you had to change your mindset to get there,
Yep.
and so I'm wondering if you think having that shift of mindset is more important, or just maybe a part of one of the practical steps to getting your family and you outside and doing the nature stuff is just like realizing that you can,
Yeah.
or if there are other things that are a part of that that are maybe more important than that initial thought.
Yeah, and it's a really good question. And the easy way out of is, of course, to say that they both matter. But I think like the practical steps, the foundation or whatever, it's definitely a part of it. And I think it's a good place to start because you need that foundation to ensure everybody stays safe. and that you're not stuck in the trailhead looking at the trail, not knowing how to get from here to there. So I do think you need those practical steps, just the basic information to even consider the thing. But once you get past that point, honestly, I think I'd commit to the idea that mindset is even more critical, because anyone can learn the skills and the steps. Like, that's possible. But I'm a big advocate of saying that kids aren't typically the obstacle to these adventures. You hear about that all the time. My parents will be like, my kid doesn't like sleeping in a tent, or he doesn't like being in the kid carrier, or whatever. I don't think that's the case. I think it's actually the parents. I think the parents are the obstacle, and it's because they can't get out of their own way. Like, kids come into this world not knowing what to expect. They don't know where they're supposed to sleep. They don't know that they're supposed to sleep in a temperature controlled room with a white noise machine and blackout curtains and all these things. They adjust to whatever we show them. But I think parents get stuck in their ways about what they should be doing, and they start struggling with that what if factor. Like, what if my kid cries? Or what if my kid doesn't sleep in the tent? Or what if she gets cold? Or what if she gets sick? And like the list goes on and on and on. And I think that fear of the what ifs sometimes prevents parents from even trying, which is a shame. And so, because of that, I think the mindset is huge.
Well, and I think it's a mistake for people to think they have to start their outdoor life with their tiny person, or their not so tiny anymore person, with a ski touring hut trip.
Yeah,
That was great for
100%.
you because you have done ski touring hut trips
Mhm.
before, and now you're
Exactly.
going to insert baby here, and that makes sense. But if that's not you, there is no shame in saying, okay, the
Oh,
first
yeah.
thing we're going to do is go to a developed campground, and that is around the corner from a Starbucks, and
Mhm.
and try camp, and also within 15 minutes of my house, and
Or
try camping tonight
totally.
and
Or
see how
pitch a
it
tent in
goes.
your
And
backyard. So
pitch a
if
tent in your
if
backyard.
your kids are
Exactly.
terrified, worst case scenario, 2 in the morning, you can run inside. Like, that's okay too,
Exactly,
you know?
exactly. It's all about changing that mindset and taking each thing, step by step, and seeing, okay, like, let's ease ourselves into this. When
Mhm.
my sons and I, gosh, we still haven't done a multi-day backpacking trip, but
Mhm.
we've done the same backpacking trip several times now. It's gotten easier every time.
I
I
bet.
think next year is our year for a couple of days in a row.
Woo!
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And they just get older every year.
I know. I
It's
know, and
amazing.
bigger and all
Bigger
the
and more
things.
capable, and less whiny. And that was really a huge thing because, like you said, it's the parents. He can totally do the trip. Either of these
Mhm.
kids, they can totally do the trip. I did not want to tolerate listening to them do the trip. Like,
Mhm.
I want,
Mhm.
and I'm not patient enough because it's all an exercise in patience for me. I'm not a patient enough parent to say, okay, like, we can take a break every quarter mile. Like, we totally
Mhm.
can do that. I do not
Mhm.
want to do it at all, but we can, right? And my husband is like that. He's the patient hiking parent, and
Okay.
I'm the behold, the end. But of course, I am the ultra runner and he is not.
Got it.
So
Yep.
I'm like, okay, we're running 100 miles, that's the race. Let's go. And that's not how he sees the world, nor would he like to. So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
so it depends on your strengths, right? And your strengths as a family, and your interests as a
Mhm.
family, and the interests of your kid, and put all that stuff in a jar and shake it and see what you get.
Yeah, and that's so true, because I think there's a misconception that the term hardcore and whatever is being tossed around the outdoor industry a lot, and like the stuff that I enjoy, that I focus on, a lot of the stuff we focus on at Wild Kind, like a lot of that falls into the, like I said earlier, the type 2 fun. And that was largely because we didn't feel like there was any attention to that category. That said, it doesn't mean that's the only option for everybody. Like, humans are all different. Like I said earlier, I don't like rock climbing. That does not mean you and your family are not going to have a blast at the crag. Like, that's
Right.
just how we're all wired, and that's okay. It just takes a little time to kind of figure out where everyone sits on those topics.
Right, exactly. Okay, so can you give us 3 or 4 tips for people who want to take their families out on adventures, but maybe have that mindset still that it's gonna be too much work, it's gonna
Mhm.
be too hard, everyone's gonna have a miserable time, we'll all
Yeah.
end up crying and having a lot of bug bites. Okay, like
Well, yeah, like the first one, like you said, honestly, is start small. Like,
mm,
people hear the stories that I'm sharing or other people are sharing. You do not have to dive into the deep end of the pool. That is not a requirement for anybody. Start camping in your backyard, or even if you haven't done anything, try hiking. That's good too. Or try a challenge to walk around your block. Like, whatever is the next step for your family, give that a try. It doesn't have to line up with whatever you're seeing on social media or in magazines or anything else. So I think that's important. Second tip would be to remind yourself that it's okay to throw away the rules, so to
mm,
speak. And I think about this a lot when we're outside because, again, we all have house rules at home. We have bedtimes for our kids and rules about eating sweets before dinner and screen time and whatever else, whatever makes your house tick. But when you're outside a lot of the time, I think parents try to, especially when they start, try to stick to those routines as much as possible just because that's what they know. And
mhm,
that's fine if it works for your family, great. But oftentimes it doesn't because this is an entirely new environment, entirely new experience. So, like a girlfriend and I, we took our daughters on our first girls only backpacking trip this summer. It was a single overnight. Her daughter was 2, my daughter was 3. The kids did great. They hiked like a mile and a half each, 700 feet again. Like, it was pretty legit. I was proud of them. You better believe we bribed them the
oh,
entire way
yes.
with gummy bears.
Heck yes.
Like, that's not something I do on a daily basis. I'm not funneling these down her throat. But for that special 24-hour experience, that's okay.
A recent guest of ours, Zenobia Stevens, whose episode I think airs right before yours, called
Mm,
these, trail I think she called them trail vitamins. Mm.
yes. It's funny you say that because I've never used that term, but our daughter associates gummies with her vitamins because she has the gummy vitamins. So she doesn't understand the difference between like gummy bears and fruit snacks and multivitamins because to her, they're all just delicious and chewy. So she started calling them all, Mama, can I have vitamins now?
Heck yeah.
And I'm looking at
Yeah.
this like gummy bear in my hand and I'm like, oh, geez, we've fallen pretty far here, but that's okay.
I've, one of my friends who people have heard could have heard on the podcast before, Claire Shea, bribes her son with Sour Patch Kids.
Mm, those are our kid's favorite too. She
Yeah,
loves them,
yeah.
and
Trail vitamins for
she'll burn her
Zenobia.
mouth honestly because she eats so many of them. But
Yeah.
whatever. Again, it's a brief period in time. It is temporary, and that's
And
okay.
let's be honest, this isn't just for kids. I myself enjoy a Swedish fish. So
Oh
or
yes,
or
me too.
7.
Or the bag. I'm with you.
So there you go.
The third thing I wanted to throw in there too, really fast, and I wanted to kind of insert this because I think it's really important, is finding community, and that's easier said than done, but everything gets easier in
Mm,
life, whether it's
ain't that
outdoor
the truth?
adventures or just life. It gets easier when you have a support system, and when you have a support system who's asking you, "How can I help?" rather than, "Are you sure you should be doing that?" is everything. There's that expression that it takes a village. And I truly believe that we're not meant to do this parenting thing on our own. And I think that especially applies when you're tackling all of these outdoor adventures. So I think finding a community is so, so crucial.
Yeah, I recently launched the Humans Outside Challenge kits, which are kits that people can buy to help them get outside and motivate them to do this 20 minutes a day outside thing that I've been talking
Cool.
about for a couple of years now. But really, at the core of that is this challenge to go outside every day for however long you want to challenge yourself to do. So for me, that's 20 minutes. And I base that on a variety of things, including the fact that I thought 20 minutes was something I would actually do. Um, because that's a pretty important
That's fair.
step
Totally.
of picking something to do. But what's been wonderful about that is that it really has been a gentle on ramp to trying new things. And so I did not start my daily outdoor time by cross country skiing. I started my daily outdoor time by sitting on my porch,
Mhm.
or by going on a walk around my house, or by going down into my little small town and attending the outdoor market, right? Like these are not big adventures. They are outside and they are little things.
Mhm.
But they taught me that I could take my kids to that stuff. Okay, let's
Mhm.
try something else. I did not it's just like when you if you are a runner, the first day you started running, you did not run a marathon. You did not run a 5K. You may
Truth.
not have even run 1 mile, right?
Mhm.
You worked up to it and you became more and more comfortable over time, and eventually you woke up and you were insane, if you're me, and you thought, "I think I'll try 100 miles."
Good for
Mm-mm,
you.
nope. So,
Haven't managed to
right,
go
you
that
didn't
far.
start by taking well, but you didn't start by you didn't, like, give birth and the next day say, "I think we'll go on a hut trip." You
No,
worked into it.
that
Um
definitely did not happen.
Yeah, and that's really important to remember when you in a world where social media allows us to compare ourselves to other people,
Mhm.
it's really important to remember that for all the good that having a community around you can be and inspiring and all that stuff, that comparison is the killer too.
Mhm.
That I don't need to compare what's good for me outside to what's good for you outside because I'm
Yep.
probably not going to take even my 9 and 12-year-old on a multi-day skiing hut trip anytime soon.
And that's
Um,
okay.
and that's fine. This
Yeah.
year we have worked up to what I think is going to be much more adventurous than I thought it was going to be because I don't think my husband's going to be there, so it's just going to be me.
Ooh. Ooh, that's
And
tough.
we're going to ski in, and we have to bring our own firewood into a cabin
Oh,
here
dang.
nearby. I know. So I know. I'm like, I've got a couple months, guys, before this happens, where it's like it's what they call in Music Man the thinking method. So I'm just like thinking about it. So
Yeah, it sounds like you need a polk sled.
I'm using the thinking method to convince myself that this will be totally fine. And guess what? If it's not and we get there and it's not fine, we come home. That's what we do. And that's fine
Yes.
too.
And that exactly what you just said is what I tell to a lot of families when they were stressing about the what ifs and the fears and all the things. I always say, let's evaluate what is the absolute worst that happens. And more often than not, it's what you just said. You come home, it doesn't work out, whatever. That's fine. The world does not end. The sky did not fall. That's
No,
okay.
exactly. And hopefully I learned something and I'm not deterred. I'm like making forecasted like I'm speaking truth into the future. I am not deterred. I learned something and I'm trying again. So
Yes.
all right. I think we could talk to you about this subject literally all day. I've enjoyed this so much, but in the interest of letting everybody not listen to this episode again anymore eventually, move on to our leftovers round. And I would love to know, since we've been talking about gear, we've been talking about these tools, what are your most essential and favorite, one or the other, or maybe both, outdoor gear items?
So I have both. So my favorite outdoor gear items, I have two. One is our Thule Chariot, the trailer. We use it year round for biking, running, walking, skiing. It's amazing. The second one is the $9 voile strap because those things come in handy every single time I go outside, whether it's with broken gear, who knows? They're wonderful, so useful. I think everybody needs to have them. And my most essential outdoor gear item is something called a Coola Cloth. I don't know if
Ah,
you're
yes. The
okay.
Coola Cloth has
Yes.
been featured here multiple times.
Oh, Anastasia, the founder, is a wonderful human. I've known her for some years. She's been one of my testers for a long time. And it's been so great seeing Kula in the wild and grow
So
and develop.
remind me, I don't need a reminder, let's be honest, but remind other people who maybe haven't heard of this wonderful invention what
Yes.
it is.
So a Coola cloth is basically the world's first reusable pea rag. So it's
Yes, a
designed
pee
for
rag. Don't
it's
be
a pea
grossed out,
rag.
guys.
Yes, to clarify.
It's so good. It's so good. Keep going.
Yeah, and it's designed for anybody who squats when they pee. And one side's antimicrobial, the other side, she works with all sorts of artists to make all these beautiful prints. We actually have two wild kind prints that some of the moms in our community design. They're like family oriented patterns. But you use it when you pee, use it to wipe, and then you can hang it on your backpack, your tent, whatever it is. And the sun's UV rays will disinfect it while it dries. So you can use it when you're hiking or camping, and then you go home and you can just hand wash it in the sink with soap. It's clean, it's ready to go for the next time. And not only is it easier for women in general, but it's cut down a lot on toilet paper left in the backcountry. So it's
Absolutely.
very leave no trace friendly, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
and everybody pees. Okay, so
Yeah.
I this is one of my most favorite pieces of outdoor gear.
Yes.
I gave some of my friends at Coola Cloth for Christmas.
Mhm.
I am like a Coola Cloth evangelist. And
Me
Anastasia
too.
came on Anastasia was with us on, I think, season 4 of Humans Outside. So
Okay.
anyone who's listening wants to hear more about that and like how somebody goes, wakes up one day and decides to stop being a park ranger or a
Mhm.
train
Law
cop and
enforcement, yeah.
and start making pea cloths. Listen to Anastasia's podcast episode because it was really fun, and she is just a magical human.
She
And also
is.
their Instagram feed, Coola Cloth, that's Coola with a K, is one of the funniest things on the internet. So
Truly
there
it
you go.
is. And
So
another pro tip about Coola Cloth actually for families is if you're potty training your kiddo outside, they're
oh,
amazing. Like we got our daughter one as a stocking stuffer right before we potty trained, so it's like her special Coola, she calls it, and we picked a pattern that had like pink lollipops and rainbows and
very
unicorns on it.
smart.
And so like she's very like, "Can I use my Coola now, mama?" Like it was a very successful driving factor for getting her to pee
That
outside
is
because
using
especially
the
for little
old
girls,
noodle.
that's
Good
hard for little
job.
girls when you're like talking to a 2-year-old and you're like, let's learn to squat. Like it's not
Yeah.
easy. So
No, it's not. That's a good job, mom. Very smart.
coolest save the day.
That's cool. Sorry, Kelly. Just all right. Oh, we're here for the cheese. What can I say? Okay.
Oh, that was great.
Walk us out with a vision, if you will, of your favorite outdoor space. If you were to tell us about somewhere that you just love, that you like
Mhm.
to remember and think about, where are you and what are you doing?
So at the beginning, we talked about that Thousand Island Lake, and I would go back there. This particular moment, my husband was off finding the campsite, and I was sitting with Liliana. She was 7 months. We're sitting on this big granite boulder waiting for him to come back. And she discovered these two little rocks, and she just was so overjoyed to sit there on that rock, bang her two little rocks together for like 45 minutes. Sun's on her face, birds are chirping. It was straight out of a movie. And it was such a simple and pure and wonderful memory that I know it's something I'll never forget. So it's a good place to end.
Yes, it is. Heather, thank you so much for joining us on Humans Outside today. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Humans Outside. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a little love and leave a rating and review to make it easier for others to find the podcast too. What you say matters. It really truly does make a difference. And until next time, we'll see you out there.